Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today of the conference Hope Waving Communities Together with Elaine, with the artist Elaine. I am Sara Danieli, the head of art at ACC Italy in Venice. I just wanted to make a small introduction about the ACC. So ACC stands for European Cultural Center. This is a cultural organization that was established in 2002, and it was is a cultural organization that organizes worldwide exhibition of art, architecture, but also symposium, publication, and video interview. In 2011, the project established was settled down in Venice, and it opened its first biennial art exhibition. And then now in 2024, we open our 7th edition of our art biennial under the title of Personal Structures, where Elaine is participating. We have the honor to present her project, in Palazzo Mora. So Personal Structure is an art exhibition where we present artists, the work of artists from all over the world that can speak through their art about the current topics that are important for us and that can give document the current situation of contemporary today, the contemporary art today, but also reflect upon our society, our question, and what is important for artists and for us, and what we can do better for create a better future. So our exhibition meant to be like a platform for artists to speak about meaningful topics, as also Elaine does with the Hope Dress. And we are very happy to present this beautiful collective project because we see that this project is kind of what we do with the exhibition, is an inclusive and collaborative work. When I met Elaine last year, it was April 2023, she was here in Venice participating in a residency of Scuola Internazionale di Grafica, right? It was really close by to Palazzo Mora, and she was wondering how it's possible to present her work in Venice, or how artists can present or can exhibit in Venice, since Venice seems to be a very inaccessible place where to be, where to exhibit. Of course, Venice is important and it's famous for the Venice Biennale, but actually all around the city there are many beautiful and stimulating exhibition. And we want to give voice to artists that perhaps they are underrepresented, or they had not the chance to find their place, or to make her voice heard. So we met by chance, by curiosity of Elaine, I think. She was like searching around the city where would it be possible to exhibit, and she found us. So we met in April. We met in Palazzo Mora. We had a tour of a walk through the venue that at that time was under construction. We were doing a lot of work. It was like in the very hot moment of the setting up of the architecture exhibition, because we organize art and architecture exhibition in alternative years. I don't know if to say like this. Yeah. So this year is the Art Biennale in parallel with the Venice Biennale, and then next year we are already organizing the architecture exhibition. So at that time, 2023, we were in in the middle of the organization and setting up the architecture exhibition. So the space were like, you know, not as beautiful as you see now. And she also remembers she fell in love with some rooms at the first floor of Palazzo Mora. And actually one of the room was the one where she's exhibiting now. And we were also looking for the best space, considering the dimension of the work and considering all the energy and all the lives and the experience of the people that were involved in that project. And so together with the team, we decided to present it in a room in Palazzo Mora, where it fits, I think, beautifully, also because of the ceiling that has an affresco from the Tiepolo school, and the colors of this fresco, it's really fits with the beautiful colors of the dress. So and also with the other works that surround the dress and are together in the same floor of Palazzo Mora. So what we want also together with the artists and their work is to create a dialogue and inspire discussion through the topics that they bring in the exhibition. So and also our aim is not just to showcase the works, but it's important for us to give the possibility to learn more about the project, to learn about the process, and to get deep into the core of why the work has been done, and what would be the connection also with other work, and what are the questions raised by a work that also was made by many different people. So together with the exhibition, at least for 7 months, from April to November, in parallel with the Biennale, we intend to create a program of events, as we are doing now and today and tomorrow, that we invite everyone to participate to the workshop, always lead by Elaine and other professionalism that then Micaela will introduce. So, and this program will allow us to involve the public, involve the visitors, and raise like discussion and conversation. So I hope that I welcome you, everyone online and in present, to follow the inspiring discussion, conversation that we will have today. And so thank you very much for Elaine for make us this is possible, and yeah, I give the floor to Elaine to introduce her work. Thank you very much.
So I just want to say thank you, Sara, for all of your help. I mean, I think I've made a load of notes here, and what I normally do is then don't refer to them, but I will refer to them. But yeah, so I just want to say, especially to the European Cultural Centre, to Sara, to Micaela, and to Miguel, and to Marco, and to Lilia, and Micaela, just thank you. You're just been, the organisation is absolutely sublime and professional. And I think you talk about how we met, and I think I was, as you rightly said, I was doing a residency here, and I'd heard, and I think artists might be interested in this online, especially and in the room, is that there's a sort of sense of how would I show my work in Venice? You know, how could that come true? Is that a possibility? And I think when I was here doing my residency, it was a thought that came into my head. And I'd already made the Hope Project, and the Hope Project had already toured, so it was already up and running. And I just had that dream. And I'd been coming to the Venice Biennale as a student for many years as an fashion student, and then an art student, because I come from two disciplines. I come from a fashion background and an art background. And how to make that possible. This was a dream, and I really just followed my nose and followed my gut in terms of coming here, because I read a bit about the European Cultural Centre, about the inclusivity of the European Cultural Centre, and I wanted to know what that really meant. And I think what I found out since exhibiting here with you is that there is a sense of everything is possible. You will look at art and I think you were very interested in the Hope Project right from the beginning, because it seemed to align well with what your belief and your ethos is here at the European Cultural Centre. So I think it's been a lovely fit, and it was a bit hairy at times when I didn't have the funding, and I didn't even know I was going to get funding, and I got Arts Council funding finally. So I've kind of started from the back, and now I'm going to scroll back and tell more of the story of the Hope Project. So you see me lifting my notes up a little bit. I think I'd like to start with mentioning an artist who really inspired me on my degree and on my master's, called Lily Yeh. And Lily Yeh talked about, so I got some information from a conversation online by Richard Whittaker, but basically Lily Yeh took the initiative, and she transformed an abandoned lot in a city, Philadelphia, into an art park. And the park blossomed into a village of art and humanities, an organisation that has built many more art parks and gardens, and renovated abandoned homes, and created educational programs, art workshops, after-school programs, a youth theatre, and a joyful community celebrations. And Lily's organisation, you might want to check her out, Barefoot Artists, Inc., has for many years taught residents and artists how to replicate the village model that they set up, the communities around, and she's done this around the world. A little quote from her, from Lily Yeh. She said, "Our society, in a way, puts artists on a pedestal. They're the ones who have the gift to create." She says, "I want to be an artist who lights up other people's pilot lights so that we shine together. I believe that everyone has that creativity. It's a gift to us as human beings, but a lot of the time we leave it dormant. At a lot of the time we disempower ourselves by saying, 'I'm not an artist, I can't do that.' So she says, I want people to realize that innate light and creativity, so that her work is to awaken other people's creativity. And I really align with that in terms of this project and the work that I do as an artist." So a bit about the Hope Dress. So in 2020, I lost all my work, really, because there was a world pandemic. And I was working inclusively with vulnerable groups, and so we had to keep those groups safe. So I lost all my work, and I didn't quite know what to do. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and I joined this group. It was an online American group from New York, and it was so inspiring, and a lot of the talk on this group was about contact. How do we get our work out there as artists? Well, we have that problem anyway, but in a pandemic, it's even more of a problem. So a lot of the talk was about contacting I'm going to look at my notes now, because non-profit making institutions. So that means, for people that don't know what that means, that's museums, basically, non-profits. So people that aren't making money, so galleries are making money, so non-profits and museums, so they get funded through governments and various other sectors. So I started having a little look at that online, through them inspiring me to do that. And I was looking for non-profits in the area that I lived, which was in Kent in the UK, and around that area. And I was also interested in who had textile collections, because that's my background. Fashion and art is my background. So I was really interested in the textiles in these museums. And I found Maidstone Museum, which is a museum in Kent, and they have something called the tapper cloths, which are these ancient cloths from tribal communities that were collected from Papua New Guinea. And these cloths were made from the bark of trees. And I was really inspired by how they were put together. They were sort of hammered together and also woven. And I say hammered because we're going to be talking to an artist later, Alison Cotton, who will be talking about hapazomi, which is an eco-printing technique. So I started researching the Maidstone Museum, but it was the Wild West. You couldn't speak to anyone. No one was there. No one was at the end of a phone. No one was on email, because everyone was being, in the UK, we were all being furloughed. If you were lucky enough to be furloughed, which meant you got money from the government, and if you were an artist, probably didn't get any much money from the government. So there weren't many people around. So I had to, and this was where the New York group came in. They were like, you've just got to keep going at this. So I kept emailing and hassling. And of course, I'm British, you know, and we don't like to hassle too much. We don't want to be rude. And but I sort of let that go and thought, no, okay, let's hustle here a bit. We need to push this forward. So I did keep emailing, and I finally got to speak to Evelyn in education, and Alex Gur is curator. We had a socially distanced meeting at my studio, and we started hatching a plan. The seeds were sown at that point for the Hope dress. Didn't quite know what it was going to be. But as an artist, one of the motifs in my work, having come from a fashion industry, is the dress. So that has repeated many times in prints where I've made of images of dresses. And I've used an image of an image that has repeated is a childlike drawing of a dress. So you can see behind me the actual drawing of, or the image of the Hope dress is a sort of like a childlike image of a dress with the arms up. So that was all starting to happen. I'm just having a quick look at my notes. I knew I wanted to create something that brought people together. I'd listened to the poet laureate, Carol Ann Duffy, talk about, in the UK, all the bookshops were closing, and she felt, as she got into a van with a load of poets and drove around the UK to visit all these shops, these bookshops, and she felt that she was sort of weaving this thread between each of the bookshops by going there in person. And I loved that idea, and I thought I wanted to bring people together through thread, through clothing. We all know clothing, and we all know fabric because we interact with it all the time. We put it on our bodies every day. So we all understand this idea of cloth and thread and weaving, and they're really important metaphors in the world of today. So I had this idea. I started getting some online teaching, and I sent out to my students these little packs that were kits, and I got them, and I was holding up these little looms in the camera, showing them how to weave. And I suddenly thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. I started weaving on everything I could get hold of, a table, anywhere that I could wrap it's called a warp and a weft. So you've got the wind is blowing my notes here, so excuse me, I'm just having a note moment. Okay, it's page 2. Warp and the weft. So anywhere that I could string up a loom, I was very excited. So I was doing it on backs of doors and on tables. And it got me thinking that actually I could make something quite big. I didn't have to stick to this idea of a loom, whatever size that was. So, and then how was I going to do this? Oh, okay, I could get people to write. So I wanted people to interact. So I sent out, so the idea was to send out kits to all my vulnerable groups. So what happened was I then got in touch with a lady that I'd met years ago in the fashion industry called Claire Swift. Now, Claire is the Director of Social Responsibility at London College of Fashion, and she's recently been awarded an OBE for groundbreaking work for something called Making for Change, where she is set up a fully equipped fashion training manufacturing unit in a women's prison, and the work she's doing incredible. So Claire immediately became on board with this project and donated all the fabric for the Hope dress. So we received all the fabric in the studio and we cut it up into strips with the help of my intern Eve and sent them all out to various places, all of the groups that I'd worked with, the visually impaired groups, people with mental health, and lots of different groups, the elderly school groups, and people wrote words of hope onto these strips of fabric and then sent them back in the post with a self-addressed envelope. So they were all collated, and in my studio I then wove that huge dress. The loom was designed, again, based on this idea of a child's drawing. So to cut a long story short, the dress then toured the UK and it went to the Resilience Revolution in Blackpool. And one of the children saw the dress and she looked up at it and she said, "It looks like an angel." And that really touched my heart. And I've heard many people say the same. So I managed to secure Arts Council funding for the Hope dress, for the whole project. And I've also worked on getting Arts Council funding for this part of the journey, bringing it to the Venice Biennale. And part of this project is not only to have shown the work, and the work is here till November the 24th, I think. Am I right, Sara? 24th? So if you can come and see the Hope dress, I would love you to. It's at Palazzo Mora. But part of this project was also to set up talks and workshops and giving voice to other people, participants that I've worked with. Effie is here, who worked with me originally. And I've also been working with one of my Nepalese ladies who I'm currently setting up workshops in England where she's teaching her community, Nepalese artists, and it's giving her an income, and I'm supporting her to exhibit her work in exhibitions. So this Hope project goes out a lot further than just here, right now. And I would just like to say, let me just turn over the page. We're getting close to the end of my speech. So the Hope dress stands for sustainability because it uses remnants from the clothing industry in new and creative ways. So all of that fabric came from the London College of Fashion, and it was the end of lines of the collections, of the student collections. So it was the remnants that I was given to weave into this dress. So the giant loom, the dress woven onto the loom in a sketchbook, that idea was founded, in my sketchbook. It was an idea that came many, many years ago. So, so right now, I believe right now on this planet, more than any other time, we need creatives. And we need creative thinking people. been in a world of science, and we need science too, but we need artists. And I believe that the Hope Dress stands for bringing communities together, and that's what I hope these talks will do. I've invited nine speakers, including myself, from all over the world to share their ideas, new ideas about sustainability, about fashion and art. So I'm excited to now sit and listen to all the other speakers, and thank you, Sara, again, and thank you so much, Micaela, for all your help. Thank you.
So thank you, Elaine, for bring us to this journey, beautiful journey, bring us here in Venice, and good luck for the next steps and the future experience and journey. Now I give you the floor to Micaela, that she organized together with Elaine. She helped in organizing the talks and the workshop for tomorrow. And I wish you all good day, and hoping in inspiring new ideas and creative solution for our future through art and fashion. So thank you very much.
Hello. My name is Micaela. Thank you, Sara, for introducing me. I'm very happy to be here today with the audience, with Elaine, with part of the speakers who will join us here and also from remote. My role here today is to introduce each speaker, and at the end of each talk, if you have any questions here from the audience, also remotely, write them up or just raise your hands and I will pass you the microphone. So let's start with the first speaker. We are going to listen to Dr. Julia Winckler, Principal Lecturer at the University of Brighton, UK. Dr. Julia Winckler is a photographer and writer with extensive experience in developing curriculum and arts projects in academic and community organizations in Canada, Britain, Niger, and Hong Kong. As principal lecturer at the University of Brighton in the UK, Julia Winckler convenes the MA module Participatory Practice for Social Change, and that's why she has been included in this program. Yes?
Can I just mention she was my lecturer and a great inspiration, and taught me about Lily Yeh, so I'd like to just mention that.
Well, I'm so looking forward listening to her talk. She will share several examples of collaborative art making, focusing primarily on craftivism. I'm very, very curious, which is an accessible creative practice that combines art, activism, and craft in order to raise awareness on social issues and forge connections and help nurture positive change. So, Julia will be connected with us from remote.
For inviting me to join this today's session. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk briefly about my interests in art for change, and I've got about 15 minutes now to share with you some of my interests. I'm a principal lecturer at the University of Brighton. I teach in the School of Art and Media, and for a very long time I've been convening a master's module called Participatory Media Practice for Social Change. And my title today, the title for today's talk is Making Connections Through Collaborative Practice. I'm really delighted to be speaking as part of HOPE, Weaving Communities Together, the event organized by Elaine Foster-Gandey. And I first worked with Elaine on a project, an exhibition that Elaine had in Brighton called Movement Makes Marks. It was an exhibition that Elaine asked me to co-curate with her at Brighton's Onca Gallery. And for that exhibition, she displayed some incredible etchings that she'd made over the course of a year, plates that copper plates that she'd attached to her body, and then made marks on the ground and turned into beautiful prints through the process of printmaking. And for the exhibition at Onca Gallery, some of these were scanned and printed onto fabric, which referred to her professional background in the fashion industry, but also to her grandmother's work as a seamstress. I think it's important to mention this as part of the Hope Dress event, these connections that Elaine has to material, to fabric, to dress, to materials. Her etchings at the time had a really timeless quality and had contained lines, and I felt they could be landscapes seen from up close or from afar, but they also kind of reminded me of hieroglyphs that might be containing a secret message. So for the exhibition at the Onca Gallery, Elaine and I had a couple of conversations where I asked her to tell me a little bit more about how that work came about. And at the time, she said to me, I used to sit and watch my maternal grandmother working at a Singer sewing machine for hours. She taught me how to sew. I was fascinated to see how she sculpted fabric into the most beautiful clothes. Being submerged into the world of fabric, watching her stitch, fold, tuck, gather, pleat and pin fabric together, held a fascination that had a huge impact on me growing up. And she also referred to the things that her grandmother made. She said the fabric, like skin and a mask of sort, wrapped and folded itself around the body, creating a cocoon, a place of safety. I felt my grandmother wrapped me in love using fabric. Now, I think this is something Elaine has been doing with her Hope dress, which is about bringing love, bringing understanding, bringing generosity to communities, working with people, initially creating workshops where people shared ideas, messages, including the importance of communication and kindness, and then making this collaborative dress, which you can see on view in Venice at the moment. I've just taken 2 screenshots of the dress here, which you will have seen in the exhibition. And I think there's a bit of a connection even to the etchings in terms of the layering, the folds, but here the messages are actually readable. We can actually read and see the messages. So in this talk, this is kind of a little intro to the context of how I've come to know Elaine's work, initially through the participatory media production for social change module, and then collaborating on the Onca exhibition with her. And it's been an absolute joy to see the work unfold and develop. So I thought today in my short talk, I could talk a little bit to you about craftivism, which is an incredible art form that combines activism, craft, and the desire to affect change, to make change. And the first example that I wanted to share with you is an example that I actually saw in Italy. Nearly 6 years ago now in Padova in an outdoor exhibition, a 24/7 outdoor exhibition. It was called La Cura della Vita, Tree Knitting, and it was organized by an association based in Padova called the Leo Fondonlus Association. And I was really, really struck by this outdoor exhibition. I came across it by chance, and it started my interest in craftivism, which can include knitting, crocheting, quilt making, using fabric, using threads to bring communities together. So I'll share a couple of examples from this exhibition. This is in a very public square in Padova, not far from the train station and the coach station. And this exhibition involved several trees being wrapped in these lovely pieces of crocheted material, kind of hugging the trees, taking care of the trees, keeping the trees beautiful, colorful, but also bringing joy to people sitting on these benches. There were many, many migrants there at the time who have come to Europe to seek sanctuary. And the I learned about I read about the story behind the exhibition. The organization works with people who have lost family members, friends, to suicide, to tragic illnesses, and they run workshops for people to come together and crochet and talk about their experiences in community settings and sharing their stories. But while they share their stories, they make these lovely little pieces of crocheted material that are then woven together, stitched together into larger pieces, like you see in this close up here. And it's a way of coming together, sharing stories, but also making something beautiful that is then exhibited in a public space, which I just found very uplifting and beautiful. And then I started reading more about craftivism, and there's a whole movement out there. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it already. It's a worldwide movement. There are various books, publications. There's even a craftivism manifesto, and one of the first books that came out on craftivism is by Betsy Greer. She wrote a book called Knitting for Good. And in this book, she talks about or defines craftivism as the practice of engaged creativity, especially regarding political or social causes. She says that by using creative energy to help make the world a better place, craftivists help bring about positive change via personalized activism. Craftivism allows practitioners to customize their particular skills to address particular causes. And the Craftivism Manifesto talks about craftivism being about raising consciousness, creating a better world stitch by stitch. It's about creating wider conversations about uncomfortable social issues. And I really like the gentleness of this approach, the inclusivity of this approach. So there's quite a detailed manifesto about people coming together and using the humble art of craftivism. There's also another writer called Sara Corbett who's written a book on craftivism. She calls herself a sustainable activist, and she has this very beautiful definition where she says, we believe craft can be a tool for gentle activism. By using the quiet, reflective time it gives us to explore global issues and how they affect the world around us, we can create something beautiful, considered, positive, and potentially world-changing. Now, there's a long history of using art, fabric, material in art and in activism that predates craftivism as a movement. And I just wanted to share with you one artwork. It's by an American artist called Faith Ringgold, Faith Ringgold sadly passed away earlier this year at the age of 94. Her work was discussed in a wonderful book by Lucy Lippard called Mixed Blessings. And Faith Ringgold used to make these incredible large-scale quilts using text, using images, stitching together small segments. She also worked with communities. This one is called Tar Beach. It's a very playful quilt, part of a series of pieces she made around women's rights, women's issues. And in Mixed Blessings, Lucy Lippard talks about quilts and working with working with fabric as the bodily knowledge of embroidery. So obviously when you're working with fabric, with quilting, with crocheting or knitting, you're using your body as you make something. You're directly connected to the work that you're making. There's something very haptic, tactile. And she talks about the body also becomes part of the artwork. I like that idea very much. So there are many organizations, both in the UK, in the US, and elsewhere, who have now adopted this idea of drawing on people's technical craft skills as well as their bodily skills to come together and work on particular themes, particular issues. So in the UK, there's an organization called Stitches in Time. They're based in London. They actually, at the moment, have an exhibition at the Tower of London all about the coronavirus pandemic. It's called Remembering Our Shared History, and they've got lots of pieces that were co-created, co-made using textiles. They also run projects, English language projects, where people come together and use craftivism and together make large-scale pieces. But another wonderful outcome is that maybe they learn to speak English, or they learn to or they share stories, they share their experiences together. It's a very, very inclusive way of working. I really like this piece. It's very topical at the moment with elections coming up again in the States at the end of this year. In 2016, in response to Trump's election, Virginia Johnson in Massachusetts, who's part of an organization called Gather Here Online, collectively with other community activists, made these lovely fabric banners, which simply said, "You belong here." And it was an attempt to make people feel connected, welcome, part of the country. It was partially in response to Trump's election, also this idea of building a wall that would exclude others. There's another great organization in the US called Social Justice Sewing. They were founded a year later in 2017. They engage in creative, collaborative quilt making. Recently, they published a book called Stitching Stolen Lives, the Social Justice Sewing Academy Remembrance Project. And this is their logo, social justice in the center, with just a needle, a resistance fist, and a pair of scissors. To articulate that through very humble means, stories can be shared and told. And on the right-hand side are just a couple of examples of their work. No person is illegal. Love is everything. They work with communities in different places across the US to make these wonderful quilts that are then displayed in public settings, in public spaces. I also really like this work here. It's not using fabric, it uses strings to weave the plastic waste together. This is plastic waste sourced from the sea. It's a French project, and then reorganized according to color. The lids and plastic bottles and so on, but beautifully then kind of rearranged. This is from a project where the French artist Françoise Dupré was invited to collaborate on a piece of work for the Women's Library, which is in London. And together with a group of women with a migratory background, they made these wonderful display sections with display pieces, which were then shown at the Women's Library. And I particularly like what Françoise Dupré says about the collaborative process. She says, "For me, a meaningful and ethical collaborative participatory practice is one that engages with participants' identity, taps into their experience and history, and provides a context for participants to become active social subjects. Integral to the process is the production of some kind of tangible object where individuals and communities can, through the making and experiencing of the object's physicality and materiality, translate emotions, desires, and experiences, create new meanings, and shape their identity." So project was called Other Seas, and it's kind of a reflection on the boat people, these perilous journeys crossing the Mediterranean from North Africa into well, often Sicily, Italy, and now the UK for the last couple of years as well. And it's a reflection on these perilous journeys, creating something beautiful, but also reflecting on kind of the stories, honoring the stories that some of the people had and wanted to share. So craftivism is a really very simple device that can actually be very impactful when people start sharing their journeys. And I just to show you this example, I took this last week, this photograph in Lewis. You can probably see the graffiti on the wall. It says brick brightness, and there's a woman with an umbrella. She's kind of taking off and flying up in the sky, and underneath it you've got this string suspended like a washing line, and attached to, let's say, the washing line string are these lovely tiny little flower crocheted flowers to bring beauty to this not particularly nice wall, and to cheer people up. So here the function is simply to make you smile, but also to create a sense of connection, community. It's a gesture that it's a gesture of kindness to make another person, a stranger, happy. And in the spirit of kind of making people feel better about themselves, I wanted to briefly show you the work again of Betsy Greer, who I mentioned earlier. She wrote one of the books on craftivism. She was very inspired by another artist whose work I will show you next. The artist's name is Susan O'Malley, who created collaborative workshops where she produced positive messages with other people. So Betsy Greer came up with this idea of very simple, you're so very beautiful, you're somebody, tiny little pieces that she made, that she stitched onto small pieces of fabric, and the small affirmations that she would like to have heard people tell her about. She shared these in public spaces, in libraries. She put them into book covers. The things that she left for people to find, to hear what they maybe needed to hear. So this was an idea of an outpouring of kindness as I healed my own heart, because I knew that just as much as I needed to heal, others did too. A very generous gesture of leaving a message that makes people feel better. So Susan O'Malley very sadly passed away very young. She had worked with people in San Francisco and asked people aged 7 to 88 what advice they would like to give their 80-year-old self. So what would they say to themselves in the future? And it's things like, be here now, you're exactly where you need to be, look to others for help and to help, live each day as if it's your last, listen to your heart. These are really inspirational messages, and they kind of reminded me as well of Elaine Foster-Gandey's Hope dress and the messages that are woven into that dress. So I want to just finish by telling you a little bit about the work of Corita Kent, because it'll take us full circle back to the start of my presentation. Corita Kent was a really interesting American artist, an activist, educator. Interestingly, for some time in her life, she was also a nun. She eventually left the order. But even while she was a nun, in the monastery, they had incredible printmaking facilities. And there's now a Corita Kent Center in the States. You can look this up later if you're interested, if you go to corita.org. She made this really inspirational prints, similar to the Susan O'Malley or Betsy Greer idea of inspirational messages, very kind of lo-fi, low-tech. And this one here says, be of love a little more careful than of everything else. And this one here, look, love is here to stay, and that's enough. And the last one I want to share with you is there's two different pieces she made, two different prints. On the left-hand side, you see we carry within us the wonders we seek without us. And on the right, we can only speak of hope. And so she used printmaking, words alongside color. Color was very important to her. So I'll just very quickly go back in my presentation. Please bear with me a second, because I will take you back to where I started. So I just want to come back very briefly to this piece here, the Hope dress. I think it's wonderful that this Hope dress has now traveled, that Elaine has taken it from the UK to Italy. She's hoping it will go to other countries, other places, and that it will make people feel better, make people feel wrapped in love, make people feel that they could also create something that could inspire others. It's something that they can kind of ideas that they can develop further themselves. And I guess the ultimate message of this talk is art can bring healing, art can bring joy, art can affect change. And the idea of art for change is something that isn't just implicit in craftivism and the module participatory media practice for social change. I also look at the use of photography, video, popular theatre. There's so many different ways of exploring issues that go beyond talking, that go beyond words, that tap into embodied ways of knowing, and that help people feel connected through the process of collaborating with each other. So thank you for your time, for listening, and please feel free to get in touch if you have any questions via Elaine perhaps, and enjoy the rest of your day and all the other fabulous presentations.
Is it working? Okay. Thank you, Julia. It was definitely inspiring. I'm glad to know more now about craftivism and the examples that Julia listed, starting from the one of Padova. I was like, oh, Padova. We have actually one in the audience who lived here, and I looked at her, Claudia, and I was like, do you recall 2018? And she's, yeah. Wonderful. So, any thoughts?
Testing. Yes, so we've got, yes, thank you. It was so inspiring. Julia has always inspired me. So she was my lecturer. She's also a wonderful photographer. So I would encourage you to look at the projects that she gets involved in online, juliawinckler.com, I think she is. There'll be, I think we'll have some notes probably from this lecture, a talk series that we can share with people. But yeah, it was really lovely to hear that you remember, yes. And do you want to say a bit about that, what you remembered seeing?
I remember in particular the colors. That's what it remains, especially to me, because that area, it's really the center of my city, and it's all kind of gray and white. And I think it was also, I don't remember exactly the season, but I think it was also cold, so it was a really like grayish atmosphere, and this installation were something warm, something that came up, and I really remember, so it was nice to reconnect memories and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember seeing it online and was really blown away by it, actually. And actually, so that's interesting. Yeah, what Julia talks about is, I think, when we see these things, that they're sort of subliminal, they go into our minds, and we don't know how they affect us. But I think she ended on the idea of hope, and that how this craftism, and how we can colour the world with these messages of hope. So art is this great tool for change, and especially, anyway, I would really recommend people looking at the various artists that she's talked about. There's a lot there. Anyway.
Thank you, Elaine. Puoi passare il microfono?
I just wanted to share your thought. That very surprised me, the last artist, Corita Kent, that I didn't know her since last week. Actually, Friday, I invite you, everyone, to go and see the Vatican Pavilion in Giudecca, because there are some works of Corita Kent, and was very, very inspiring because of the messages of hope. She was working during the Vietnam Wars, and there were many issues at that time, including the war that we are now facing. So their message of hopes are universal. I think they're very universal and with no time. So even if the work are of about 1986, the last one. So after so many years, still that messages are strong and important for all of us. So it was very, very inspiring and surprising to see Corita Kent in the presentation. And I just went also to connect about the fact that the Vatican Pavilion is inside the female jail in Giudecca. So it's a very, of course, particular space for entering. There are a procedure, of course, you have to book online, as they allowed us only a small group of people. And there are a lot of time during the day that you can visit the space, of course, without anything. So no phone, no bags and everything. They ask you to leave it at the entrance. And the tour, the tour is guided by two female prisoners. And I remember when I went last week that there were some trees that had the same knitting of the first artist. So it was a circle that started from the work that was presented by Julia until the end of the work of Corita Kent. And it's very inspiring knowing that the female inside the prison, they do a lot of activities. And the main one is about fashion. They produce dresses. And there are also a shop where the dresses made by the female prisoner they're sold. So it's it was just a connection of information, ideas, and I know it was nice to share it and invite you to go and visit it if you have the chance. That's it.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you, Sara. And I just wanted to say that's also lovely because Claire Swift, who has just received an OBE from the English government, her work, as I mentioned earlier, Making for Change, where they've set up a manufacturing unit in prison for female prison, helping them to find ways of earning money for themselves, and developing their ideas and their creativity and knowledge and learning new skills. Yeah, it's a nice connection. Yeah. Thank you.
It's a fil rouge.
Thank you. Anybody else? Great. So we've been informed recently that we had a switch in the program. So the next speaker will be Jo Hague, sustainable textile designer from UK. Jo Hague specializes in making 3D sculpture walls and hanging artworks artworks for indoor and outdoor spaces. She repurposes discarded industrial plastic waste and at times will combine them with 100% organic wool felt to transform them into handcrafted artworks that have their own unique stories. Jo is passionate about raising awareness of plastic pollution when highlighting the importance of maintaining our ecosystem and wildlife. She delivers workshops, collaborates with schools, and undertakes community art projects. And she will be talking about her work with repurposed plastic materials and recent findings. So I leave the word to Jo. Hi, welcome.
Hello there, thank you. I'm not at all, I'm a baker. So I might need Marco just give me a little hand here, if at all possible.
Yeah, you're good. You just have to click on present right now and we'll be able to see it full screen.
Clicked, oh okay, present full screen. Present full screen, there we go. Okay.
Okay, everything's good. Thank you, Jo.
That looks good. And it was the first morning, literally, of the holiday. And as I said, I had just finished the second year doing my textile degree at Falmouth University. And I walked across the beach. I remember it so clearly now. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, the family were all still in bed, the dog was still asleep, and I walked across the beach and I could see this black mass of something in the distance. And I walked towards it. It was moving in the wind, it was wafting, it was broken up, and I literally looked at it and I felt it, and I knew that it was going to become waste at some stage. And when I felt it, I knew I could do something with it. Something just hit me in the gut. So later that day, I contacted the Cornwall Council and the Duchy of Cornwall, and I asked them what was this black mass, this plastic on the beach on St. Mary's, the island where we were staying. And I was told that it was known, it's shaped a little bit like an egg box. It's really durable, it's a polyamide, and I was told that it's used for sea defences. So it was used on quite a lot of the beaches on the islands, and it literally enables the grasses to grow through the pockets of the plastic, the matting, but also at the same time holding back the sand. So this was plastic, industrial, and at some stage it was going to be coming off the beach as waste, either with replenishing it with a different type of material in time, or the same new type of material. So then, in the third year of my university degree, I set up a collaboration with the Isles of Scilly and the Council and the Duchy of Cornwall. And they helped me through the third year of the degree, and that enabled me to test the geotextile matting. They said that I could have pieces from that waste, and I explored, I played, I laser cutted into it, I stitched it, I made jewellery out of it. And then I graduated in 2019, and I then went on looking at industrial plastics. And for me, it was all about keeping the plastics out of landfill and incineration, repurposing. What could we be doing with other plastics, not just single-use plastic, but plastic that we tend to be using time and time again, that will wear out at some stage. So these are some of the plastics that I use in my work. We're now 4 to 5 years down the line, and I use various types of netting, so the scaffolding netting, garden and fruit cage netting, soft netting bags from the supermarket, Christmas tree packaging, and also non-slip rubber matting, because that's got rubber and PVC in, and all these are now used in my work. But also, the threads that I use sometimes are organic cotton threads, but I tend to be using now UVA nylon thread from sailmakers. These are threads that are left on the spools after they've actually made the sails. I do buy in RPET threads, which are made from recycled plastic bottles, but this is really expensive because they're recycled. So I try to reuse threads from other areas. Electrical wiring rubber sleeve again, and then if I'm doing an indoor installation, I probably will be using organic wool felt and maybe mixing that felt with a plastic, a scaffolding felt or a scaffolding netting. And then last but not least, is the fantastic geotextile matting, which I use for all my canvases, for my hangings. So why am I repurposing, and what's important to me? It's all about my carbon footprint. It's all about the circular economy for me, and it's about keeping these plastics, like I said, out of incineration, the oceans and our environment, and making sure that our planet is a beautiful planet and a safe planet to continue living in. So I will have deliveries of these different types of plastics. They will either come to my studio, or I will go out and get the netting once it's been used. And for me, this is all about local. It's about connecting with local industries, construction companies and supermarkets, and taking their waste and repurposing. It's all, for me again, carbon footprint and enabling the planet to thrive. So once I've received the netting and it's been deposited here at my studio, or I'll go out and get it, I will then start to sort through and look at the good and the bad of the material that I have and what I'm going to be making from it. So the bad material, the material that I cannot use and is either particularly old or has holes in it or has debris, that then will go into a skip which I share with another organisation in the county, and then a company will come along and pick up their plastics, which are single-use plastics that basically come off the beach cleans, and my plastics will go into the skip with theirs. That skip, that waste, is then taken away by this particular company and ground down to make furniture, sunglasses, plant pots, whatever it might be. So that, for me, is the circular economy. So washing the fabric, washing the netting, washing the plastics is all done in rainwater. I do not pour on the water, the domestic water within the property. It's, as you can see, it's water, it's rainwater that is collected. And then also, once it's been washed, I put out the netting and the various materials to dry, so I enable the elements to help me to dry naturally with the wind and the sun, and then the material is then put into storage. Very similar to fabric, but this is sheets. This is literally pieces of netting and plastics. So here you see a piece of my work, which is Stingray. This is probably one of the most popular makes that I do, and this literally, in a way, was born out of the first lockdown in 2020, which, as Elaine said, and for me and for many, many artists and designers and makers and creatives, it was a very devastating time. I had only just graduated and I thought, oh my goodness, my whole world has come and fallen, and what am I going to do? But this idea of having outdoor art was born out of the first lockdown. And for me, it was about having art outdoors, outside, where we all felt so much safer. So here you have Stingray. It's a two-dimensional structural design and make, and literally you've got scaffolding netting and garden netting on one side of the matting, and on the other side of the matting, you can, if you turn it round, it will look like a stained glass window. And that was another element I began to think really is a beautiful thing to be seen, is that one side you have pieces on, dimensional pieces, and the other side is literally like a church window, a stained glass window. Very durable matting, and what I love about this type of material is it lets the light through, and it's very light and durable and hard wearing. That then took me on to thinking about makes for indoor spaces. And again, this time it was about really pushing the boundaries with construction and three-dimensional sculptural designs, where I would be incorporating felt with scaffolding netting. So this is called Gwydion, and again for me, the beauty of these large constructions is enabling the light to come through and the patterns and the shadows. This piece of work called Waste Not, Want Not is probably one of my favourite makes. This was site-specific. So this was for a sculpture park, and it was 3 pieces, a triptych, where there were 3 makes, and each particular piece was 1 metre across by a 2 metre drop. And the designs that you see across the triptych are actually taken from the bark of the tree on which they're hanging. So it was literally looking at the bark of the tree, looking at the shapes, the forms, the designs, and those were born out of that. Looking at this particular image, it reminds me so much of the month of May when this was made for, when the blossoms were coming out on the shrubs and the flowers, but also the leaves hadn't fully come into their own. And so that was enabling this most beautiful light to shine through the matting plus the scaffolding and the garden netting that I was using for those constructions. And also, shadows were being portrayed across the grass, and it was a delight to make. And here are just a couple more examples of the work, the shadows, the patterns. And what I love about the elements here that add to the work is this: if this piece of work is actually standing alone or away off a wall and it's outside, you have the breeze, the movement of the piece of work, which enables those patterns and shadows to be dancing on the floor, on the wall, or on the ceiling. And that's just another element to the pieces of work. Here we have Bedruthen, which is literally a monochrome make, a very large make of structured balls, again, open balls, which are about a 10 centimetre diameter, all done with the overlocker. And again, you can start to see shadows and patterns occurring through the balls. These 2 makes are my recent makes. We have Trumpets Galore on the left of your screen, and this piece has 48 pieces constructed by hand with the overlocker, And this is a tribute to the angel trumpet shrub on the Isles of Scilly. To the right-hand side tide-lines, this was a brief that I contributed towards for Penrith Gallery in St Ives, and this was all about seaweeds, the shoreline, ecosystem, how to be looking after our oceans and our ecosystems, and looking at the plastic pollution which unfortunately enters our oceans and our seas. So this was a very organic, free movement, free piece of work, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So my mission, what's inspiring and what's important to me, is to be going out and inspiring others. And for me, in this particular image, I was invited back to Falmouth University to speak to the second year students and to hopefully inspire them about what it was like to be a sole trader, freelancer, the pitfalls, the wonderful things that can be happening as a freelance designer maker. But also for me, it was about encouraging these lovely folk to be thinking outside the box, to be open-minded, to be brave, to take risks, and to try working with new materials, and not to be afraid, and to collaborate. And it was also enabling them and encouraging them to push boundaries, and to never give up, and to hope that, you know, whatever they make, whatever their collaboration, is to just hope that it opens up new ways of working and new collaborations and community projects, and just never to stop giving up. For me, I do workshops as well, and I absolutely love them. They're a win-win, and this is for me all about enabling people to come together, unlocking the potential within that person, because I believe we all have an essence within us for creativity, and enabling these lovely people to come into the workshops and to create, to be working with materials that they never thought that they could work with, to use equipment like the heat press or the overlocker, and literally to just to relax, great for their well-being and their mental health, and very much leaving with that notion, I can do, I have done, and that self-feeling of confidence and well-being. But also throughout the workshops, it's very much about talking about our plastic pollution, raising awareness, educating, and thinking, you know, what else could I be using this particular item, this piece of plastic for, or whatever it might be. My latest project is probably one of the best projects I've ever undertaken. It was one of the best experiences. I was invited back earlier this year in April to 2024, obviously this year, and I was invited by the Five Islands Academy on the Isles of Scilly. They wanted me to spend some time with 25 to 30 primary school children from the off-islands, and they were children that were aged between 5 to 11, and they came from 4 islands out of the 5. And it was about making one very large group piece of work, a hanging. And the reason why I was invited back was because we were going to be using the geotextile matting from their beaches. So, within these photographs, you can see that the children, we started off by taking the children out to do a beach comb, and that was looking at the purpose and the functionality around the geotextile matting on their beach. Why was it there? What was it doing? What was the function? But also we did a beach comb. We came back to where we were actually setting up for the few days to do the make, and we brought back all the bits of single-use plastic and rope and all sorts of things that we had found on the beach. Then the children were asked to make one particular make, and the children were empowered and took ownership of what this the plastic pollution, and it was about their fishing industry. So we had children making a fish, a boat, maybe a starfish. Once they got the idea of what they wanted to make, they would draw the piece, they would then cut the template, they would then choose the plastic netting, which I had taken over from the mainland to the islands, and then they would start to put their colour palette together and stitch a running stitch, a blanket stitch. We taught them how to do that, but a lot of the children actually were able to do the running stitch themselves. Incredibly resourceful and very bright children. Just a wonderful experience. And so, once the children had decided on their make, what they were going to do, once it had been stitched with the running stitch and the place and the blanket stitch, it was up to them then to make their story, to make their hanging, to work together collaboratively about where the placements of their pieces were going to go and the story behind the piece. So the placement took place and we laid it out across the floor, and then we then started to think, right, we now need to stitch these pieces onto the matting itself. And as I said, the matting is like an 8-box. It's incredibly difficult to work with. It's very durable, very tough. And we needed, and we hadn't got, anywhere to hang the matting so that we could start stitching the pieces onto it. So my wonderful voluntary assistant, my sister, Georgie, who is incredibly creative, came up with this rigging up of the frame. And this was literally putting 2 tables on their ends, putting them together with a broom across the top, and that would become our frame. And I think for me this was one of the highlights of the whole adventure, was the fact that on island you have to be so resourceful. You cannot just hire something or go to the local village hall or anything like that. You have to think outside the box. So here we are, we've got our matting up now onto the frame that we've made, and for these pieces to be stitched to the matting, you have to have 2 people. It's incredibly difficult. In fact, it's near on impossible to stitch the pieces yourself onto this matting. So Georgie was one side, we had the matting between us, and I was on the other side. And we're literally here, passing the needle backwards and forwards as we place the particular items onto the matting. It takes hours. It's so time consuming, but it is so fulfilling when the piece is finally finished. So once that comes off the actual frame, we then lie it horizontally so that we can tie up all the loose ends and make good before it's actually ready to be viewed. So here we have it. There is the final piece. The children called it Silly Shoal, and it's all about their story of how important the ocean is, the microplastics, the plastics that enter, how we want to be safeguarding our ecosystems, but also for their fishing industry as islands, really, really important. So I'm going to leave that with you, and that brings me now to the end of my talk. And I think the message to all of us is to think twice, is to obviously be reducing, reusing and recycling. So instead of going out and buying new or throwing anything away, try and think about how we could be reusing it. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you for explaining us your word, what you do, how you do it. It's incredible. It's incredible to see your point of view and how you how you see the world and the potential of what surrounds us. Like, it's incredible, really. Can I start with a question?
Yes.
So while in the first slides, while you were explaining like the process, I was wondering, do you have a team to do all this, or you normally work by yourself? I was wondering because like the amount of material you manage, and like for example, the washing part, it's tough. It's really tough. So are you alone in this, or you work with your sister? Perhaps you mentioned her as well.
Thank you for recognising the point. I am completely 100% alone. So I do absolutely everything. I drive around in the car, I look for new colours on netting, on buildings. As if I see a new colour, which I did recently, it was purple. I'd never seen purple netting before. So I will contact the construction company, I'll go and get it. But all the time, I'm very aware of my carbon footprint. So I don't just go out and do one task. I will do many tasks in that journey. And yes, I am completely alone in the washing, the drying, the cutting, the pinning, make everything. The only thing that I haven't been alone with is in the last project that you saw when we went to the Isles of Scilly, because I had to have somebody to help me to stitch the pieces onto the geotextile matting. And that's the only time. So no, I keep pushing ahead and I keep hoping, you know, to be able to take my work and to show my work, which I have been doing over the last few years. And it's just a joy to do. It's great.
Can I just come in? Thank you, Joe. It was lovely to see your work, and a fellow Cornish lady. Yeah, really lovely to see your work. And I was just interested, Joe, where is that piece hanging in the Isle of Scilly?
Oh, good question. I should mention that. Thank you, Elaine. It's actually on the island of St. Agnes. So there's 5 islands altogether. And St. Agnes has actually got it hanging there. I was there 2 weeks ago, and I saw it for myself again, and it's absolutely beautiful. So it's hanging outside the island hall on St. Agnes. The island hall is their community hall, and that enables the children, the visitors, because it's quite a tourist place, to be able to see the piece of work. And then what will happen is, in the next few months, that piece of work is actually going to travel by boat through the other islands, so that family, friends and visitors can see what the children have actually made, which is brilliant.
Oh, that's really lovely to hear that, because I was thinking, oh, you know, this sounds like a beginning of a bigger project. It sounds like yeah, I could imagine these, they're really beautiful, and you, maybe a triptych or something, but yeah, I think it was, and I love the colours that you used, just to comment. I think there was such vibrant colours, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine. Well, it was the children who chose the colours. You know, they just were just so keen and wanting to make that, and it actually brought about a lot of other things which I haven't mentioned. Things like working together. They're very good at doing that. They're really resourceful and really bright. But it also helped with well-being with 1 or 2 of the youngsters, where they need maybe a little bit more attention every now and again. And you know what? Those lovely little youngsters, we didn't hear a peep out of them for 3 days because they were so absorbed in the making. It was just magical. It was magical. Just seeing them come together, working together, have a voice, and looking after their fishing industry and their oceans and seas around the islands.
Thank you again, Joe. So, if there are no more questions, we can move forward. Oh, sorry. There is a micro coming for you.
Hi, Joe. I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah. Hi. Hi, Joe. Well, first, congrats for your job. Your work is amazing. And I have a question. You say you want to inspire your students, you want to inspire that communities, but who inspired you to do the job you did?
Oh, I think that goes to my mother, if I'm really honest. She was an artist and she went on to do design and technology as a mature student. She was a single mum, but she always taught me, she taught me my stitching, obviously, as a child, but she always taught me to really to break boundaries, to take opportunities, and to take risks. And I think that's what I've done. I've always had her sitting on my shoulder. She's no longer with me now, but I thank her for that, because she was my inspiration as a single mother and bringing up three children, and basically teaching us that there are no boundaries in this world. Just go out and just do things. You never know where it's going to take you. So thank you.
No, thank you for that lovely answer. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can move forward with the next speaker. Sorry, wrong page. Up. Natasha Nickson. And now we are going to have another point of view. So we had Elaine, we had Joe as artists bringing their experience. And now we are going to listen to Natasha Nickson, who is a Senior Certification Officer for Soil Association UK. Natasha Nickson is passionate about sustainable and ethical fashion. She works to grow organic certifications in the textile industry and is an expert in the Global Organic Textile Standards, GOTS, and its evolving requirements. Natasha will be talking about organic certification and how that helps ethical and sustainable fashion. Hello, Natasha. We see you.
I hope you can hear me okay. Is there a problem with the sound coming through?
Can you hear us? Yeah, we can see you fine. We can hear you fine.
Yeah, perfect. Not day from the Fashion Revolution this afternoon. That should be a really good talk. So I work, as I say, for the Soil Association. We're a certification body that issues organic certification to textile businesses in the UK mostly, but also around the world, to GOTS certification specifically, which is the Global Organic Textile Standard. It's a certification that any business that's processing organic textile goods can gain. We certify a really wide range of products, from mattresses with organic British wool in them, to tampons, to baby wear and women's clothing. And I work, with an amazing group of women who help me deliver textile certification. So it's a really nice work to be involved with. The Soil Association is a charity that was part of the founding group that created GOTS, the standard, and has worked really closely since then to shape the standard and help it continue to grow. Soil Association Certification is the business that I work for. We're wholly owned by the charity, so we're a not-for-profit, and that means that part of the fees that our businesses pay to us for their certification goes back into the charity, which helps work with things like healthy and sustainable foods in the UK for delivering children's healthy meals at schools, and working with farmers, lots of different things for organic, basically. Certification in the fashion industry is really, really important. It's an industry that has really murky supply chains, and especially especially with the term organic, is not protected by any kind of regulation. So in the food and drink industry, you have to have an organic certification to validate those claims you're making, but in textiles and in fashion that doesn't apply. So this means that any product can be labelled as organic. It could have 5% organic or even no percent organic content, which is obviously really tricky with greenwashing claims and with being able to trace the supply chain back to where those fibres come from. Some certifications are obviously better than others. We work solely with GOTS, which I think is a certification that covers all aspects of sustainability. You do have other certifications that help trace fibre through the supply chain, but they don't cover as many areas that GOTS covers. So for GOTS products, there's a minimum of 70% organic fibres. This would be a made with organic materials label grade, so you would see the GOTS logo and you would see made with organic materials. To have the full organic label certification, they need to have a minimum of 95% organic content, which is obviously quite high for the standard. There's also a restriction on what kind of other fibres can be blended with that product, so you couldn't have 95% organic cotton and then 5% virgin polyester, because that's completely banned from the standard. Other things that are banned would be things like asbestos or mule's wool for the animal care side of things. So it's quite a stringent standard that really validates what's going into your clothes or your bedding or whatever the product may be. But as I said, GOTS doesn't just cover organic, it's actually a really holistic standard that covers social compliance, environmental due diligence and chemical management. So as I mentioned, we certify lots of different things and they have to have their residues need to be tested for chemical compliance to make sure there's no heavy metals or harmful chemicals on your product, which is really important for your skin touching those fibres to not have those heavy metals or anything on them. The social compliance also aligns with the International Labour Organization, so they have a set of principles that ensures workers are paid fairly and they have safe working conditions and they're treated fairly. And this is really to fight child labour and forced labour within the supply chains. Obviously, as I mentioned, for textiles specifically, this is really, really important because the supply chains are really not clear, they're not transparent. It's hard to trace a product back through to where it's come from and who's worked on it, whether that's your supplier or your supplier's using a subcontractor. But using GOTS certified products, you know that the whole supply chain has to be certified and that everybody touching your goods is treated fairly, is paid a living wage, and has secure employment. GOTS certification kind of provides reassurance for the whole supply chain, as I mentioned, but it doesn't certify farm level. So it's a processing standard, which means that as soon as, for example, cotton or wool is leaving the farm, that's where the processing standard begins. But the latest edition of GOTS has also included a requirement to make sure that certified entities are checking the working conditions of the farm level as well. So although they don't have to comply with the full GOTS standard at farm level, they are required to ensure there's no forced labour or child labour or unsafe working conditions. So that's globally, that could be picking the cotton, whether that's grown in India or Turkey or Tanzania or anywhere where the farm grows organic fibres that go into a GOTS product. They must be following the International Labour Organization's key principles. Outside of work, I also, as you mentioned, I'm really interested in sustainable and ethical fashion. Next Tuesday, I'll be speaking on a panel at Source Fashion in London. This is going to be alongside someone from GOTS and also two of the brands we certify, Little Green Radicals and Komodo. and it's going to be a talk about how certification can help with transparency in supply chains and build credibility for your brand. So if anybody's going to be in London next week, it would be really interesting to have you come along and talk about all things sustainable fashion or GOTS. And yeah, in my personal time, I do share my sustainability journey on LinkedIn. So it's Natasha Nickson on LinkedIn. Currently, I'm exploring how to have a more plastic-free or plastic-less, it should be, wardrobe, and how natural fibres can be replacements for the kind of reliance that we've built up for polymer fibres. And I also share kind of industry news and articles on ethical and sustainable fashion. So if that's your cup of tea, let's connect on LinkedIn. But that, I think, covers the work that Soil Association certification does. It's really enjoyable place to work and to work with businesses at the beginning of their sustainability journey, all the way through to big international brands who are now trying to build sustainability back into their practices, and how we do that through the GOTS certification. Thank you.
Also interesting to go into this technical aspects. Like we see a label, but we do not really understand what's behind. So thank you for explaining us your word.
Thank you, Natasha. I would also like to ask a question, and thanks for your lovely, eloquent talk, and it was really helpful to hear as well about more about Soil Association. I was also wondering about you and your background. What got you into this sort of line of work? Just a bit more about how you got into sustainability.
At Ravensbourne University in London. I wanted to be a buyer or a merchandiser, I wasn't quite sure. And in my second year, we did a topic on ethical fashion, and it focused on the Rana Plaza collapse and on how Fashion Revolution was built from that. And that kind of really sparked something inside of me to make me want to work specifically in sustainability. It's fashion in general can be a really wasteful industry, and at the time, it was a few years ago now, but it was just starting the rumbles of sustainability, and I basically spent all of my projects at uni after that trying to make them focused on sustainability. Did my final major project, which was creating an imaginary hemp brand, which was all about sustainability and how hemp is just the best fabric in the world. And then I later worked with a couple of different sustainable focused brands. So I worked with Lucy and Yak, and with the hemp trading company in the UK. And then, I moved from there into Soil Association to work directly on the sustainable standards.
Thank you. My daughter's favourite brand is Lucy and Yak, so really like that brand. Also, I heard you mention Komodo, and when I ran a fashion business, I had a pop-up. It was like a guerrilla-style pop-up that I ran for nearly 3 decades called Designer Sales UK, and Komodo was one of my many brands that I sold and sold for them. They were a really great brand, and so lovely to hear them still going strong. So good to hear you. And I just wanted to link to, because I know we're going to hear, as you mentioned, Ruda Nondo from Fashion Revolution later on this afternoon. Part of the Hope Dress is that the first part of the project is that when it was exhibited in a space in Kent, in a church, the vicar there was really keen for us to do the Fashion Revolution and get people to photograph their label and ask the question, where was my garment made, which was part of the Fashion Revolution manifesto. So and I taught, I've been teaching my students at college a lot about Fashion Revolution, and although the film was made in 2013, it's still really, really current today. And so thank you for mentioning Fashion Revolution, who are going to be with us later. Back.
So No questions from remote, but here. And okay, micro is coming.
Thank you. Is it working? Yes. Hi. I couldn't help but notice you used the word asbestos. Is that a thing? Do they put asbestos in clothes?
Hopefully not anymore, but it's an example of a specifically restricted substance in GOTS. So you might have seen recently that there was a study on tampons that was done that showed there's traces of heavy metals like lead and other really nasty things that you don't want to be putting on your skin or anywhere near inside you. But just to reiterate that GOTS has really specific and stringent requirements on those kind of residue requirements, and those products will be tested to make sure that they don't have anything like that, especially asbestos, but also just natural virgin polyesters or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that really, when you buy a garment or something like a tampon, there's an enormous amount of trust involved, isn't there? And that was a bit of a horrifying word that made me think, gosh, what have I been wearing? You know. Thank you for reassuring me.
Look out for the GOTS logo for that reassurance.
So that's GOTS.
Yes.
And
yeah,
what does
a green symbol.
What does it stand for?
The Global Organic Textile Standard.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, now there will be a lunch break, and we come back here at 3 p.m. Venice time or 2 p.m. UK time. Thank you, everyone. See you later, and enjoy your lunch break. Sorry. No, I was kidding. Yes. Okay.
I wanted to ask, actually, in terms of spreading more awareness about like sustainability in fashion, I feel like not everyone is as engaged in it, or some people might just think, like, why are we talking about this again? Like, what advice would you give to people that are trying to kind of educate people more, or trying to kind of spread more awareness about maybe, I think you spoke about supply chains. Like, how would do you have any advice on kind of like spreading a message in a positive way, or how to interact with people and really get them to be engaged? That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, and it's something I'm asking myself all the time, because it's obviously what I want to do as well. I think it's really hard to come at people with the negatives, and people don't want to hear that somebody in a different country has not had a living wage to make their product, and getting them engaged in what are the better options I find is more useful. So recently I mentioned I've been doing this plastic-free wardrobe sort of challenge on LinkedIn, and people have been engaging with that really well, because I think it just shows it makes it seem accessible and easy to do if you just think about what's going in your wardrobe as the first step, rather than when you're at a checkout and you need to make a decision about what's better and what's worse, and the labeling is not very clear. So I found that, yeah, there's been positive engagement just by leading by example, even with people on my LinkedIn that have no interest in fashion or textiles, have been finding that really interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, no, I think that I apologize for.
No, I just popped in my head.
So again, have a good lunch break.